Welcome to News Today. The headline news. The incumbent president, YOWERI Museveni, declared winners of disputed Uganda presidential election. The news in full. The winner of the country's presidential Uganda election, YOWERI Museveni, emerged as the Uganda's Electoral Commission declared him the winner. This winning makes the sixth term, extending his 35 years rule. His main rival, Bobi Wine, alleged fraud and urged citizens to reject the result in totality. Museveni scored 3.85 million votes, or 58.64% of the total votes casted, while main opposition candidate Bobi Wine won 3.48 million votes, or 34.83%. The commission said on Saturday the voter turnout was 52% in total. The chairman, Justice Simon Mugenyi Byabakana said, quote, "The Electoral Commission declared YOWERI Museveni elected president of the Republic of Uganda," end of quote. After the announcement, security forces flooded the streets of Kampala, the Uganda capital, with one soldier on top, and armored personnel carrier telling citizens to maintain social distance as a helicopter buzzed overhead while people gazing helplessly. Museveni supporters were jubilating in his home district, waving flags and cheering. The soldiers in the capital helped marshal motorcycle drivers for a parade with yellow vests and Museveni's posters. Museveni thanked the supporters and said that now, quote, "the only thing to avoid is violence," end of quote. Quote again, "I think this might turn out to be the most cheating-free election since 1962, end of quote, when the country achieved independence," he concluded. On the other hand, Benjamin Katana, representative of Bobi Wine, described the announcement as, quote, "an attempt to undermine the will of the people in Uganda," end of quote. The legal framework, quote again, "the legal framework in Uganda gives us a number of opportunities and options to which we can contest this unfair process, and going through the Supreme Court is one of the options," end of quote. Katana said after the results were announced, end of quote. Quote again, "We ask people of Uganda to stand firm and work with us to explore all options to make sure that we stop this coup called election," end of quote. It was alleged that the results were announced while Bobi Wine was under heavy guard at his home on the outskirts of capital Kampala, lamenting his party, saying he was under, quote, "effective house arrest," end of quote, while the government of the day said it was merely providing him with security in his home. The election was said to be one heavily rigged election. Also followed one of the bloodiest campaigns in the years, with harassment and detection of opposition figures attacked on the media, where the death of at least 54 people in protest in November. On one of the multiple occasions when Bobi Wine, the present contestant, was arrested. That was then in November, rather. That they're just recounting what happened. That's comparing the two together. One of the followed this one that happened in November. What happened now? Follow what happened in November. Now, the government ordered the internet shut down the day before the election, while the security personnel and police were out in force patrolling Kampala on Saturday. As the blackout was still in place, a complete blackout. Bobi Wine was a singer that turned lawmaker, whose real name is called Robert Yagulanyi, threatened on Friday that he had video pool of voting fraud and would share the videos as soon as internet connection were restored. He then accused Museveni of fabricating the results, described the poll as, quote, the most fraudulent election in the history of Uganda, end of quote. However, the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Bakana, said under Uganda law, the burden of proof rested with Bobi Wine. But the commission has deflected questions about how countrywide voting results were transmitted during the internet blackout by saying, quote, we designed our own system, end of quote. It could not explain how it worked. Quote again, the entire process has been conducted in the dark and it lacks transparency, end of quote. Katana, head of Bobi Wine's National Unity Platform, talked from a tally center in Kampala. Quote, from the beginning, we were assured by the Electoral Commission that each candidate or their agents will receive copies of the results from the district before they are transmitted to the National Tally Center, so that we are able to verify when they are reading here, what they are reading here, and that was never done. End of quote. Museveni is 76 years old. He campaigned for 6 terms. He argued that his long experience in office makes him a good leader and promised to keep delivering stability and progress in the country. On the other hand, Bobi Wine, a 38-year-old, galvanized and stood for the young Ugandans with his call for political change and pledged to end what he called dictatorship and widespread corruption in Uganda, governing and policy implementation. Bobi Wine said the authorities were refusing to allow him to leave his residence, maintained that the election had been rigged in Museveni's favor before election proper. Quote, he said he had evidence of widespread irregularities, end of quote. He said that he reported from Kampala, quote, he did not show his evidence. He said he is going to present his evidence once the internet is back, end of quote. It was alleged that security forces kept watch outside Bobi Wine's house in Kampala's Magere area. On Saturday, security forces had sealed off a wide perimeter around Bobi Wine's sprawling compound, preventing international journalists. It was said that they were not permitted to enter. Quote, his movements are restricted, he is not allowed to leave his house, and visitors are not allowed to enter, which in effect indicates that he is under detection, house arrest, end of quote. That's what Katana said. It also, quote again, it also shows that part of the scheme to rig and undermine the democratic process is to take away the leaders, keep them away, intimidate the citizens, switch off the internet, censor the media, which they have done effectively, and is why no local station can go and interview Bobi Wine. The Army's deputy spokesperson, Joe Ekiti, said the Bobi Wine's house were assessing threats he could face by going out. So they might be preventing him, quote, they might be preventing him in interest of his own safety, end of quote. On the area of offenses, the police recorded 42 electoral-related offenses nationwide during voting and tallying so far. Police spokesperson Fred Unanga said offenses included assaults, voter bribery, and theft and damage of electoral material are included. Monitoring of the vote was further complicated as a result of the arrest of independent monitors and the denial of accreditation so far. So many members of the United Nations United States Observer Mission that Washington called off. One Tidon Nagy, a top U.S. diplomat for Africa, said the vote was, quote, fraudulently flawed, end of quote, cited the denial of the accreditation to election observers and, quote, violence and harassment of opposition figures, end of quote, and full stop. But Morgan Otagus, the spokesperson for U.S. State Department, praised Ugandans on Saturday for voting despite, quote, despite an environment of intimidation and fear, end of quote. The lady further added that the U.S. was, quote, deeply troubled by the many credible reports of security force violence during the pre-election period and election irregularities during the poll, end of quote. A key observer, the European Union, said its offer to deploy electoral experts, quote, was not taken up, end of quote. Samuel Azu Fonkal, the head of African Union Observer Team, said he could not say whether the election had been free and fair, noting the, quote, limited, end of quote, UN vision, which largely focused on the capital, Kampala. Asked about Bobby Wine's allegation of rigging, he said he could not, quote, speak about things we did not see or observe, end of quote. Finally, therefore, the East African Community Observer Team, in its preliminary statement, noted issues including, quote, disproportionate use of force in some instances, end of quote, by security forces, the internet shutdown, some late opening polling stations, and isolated cases of failure in biometric kits to verify voters, but it called the vote largely peaceful and said, quote, demonstrated the level of maturity expected of a democracy, end of quote. And full stop. Sally Emmanuel, reporting from my channel.